You all witnessed it live. He addressed the community and diaspora in Sydney, where of course he was joined, and he is very grateful for that. He was joined by the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia, senior ministers from his government, members of the local legislature, senior councillors, other elected officials, and of course leaders from the community. Broadly, if I was to capture the overall sense, thrust of the meeting, I would describe them as very frank, honest to the extent, focused, outcome driven, and very, very productive in terms of their specific achievements in that sense. In terms of the elements of discussions which the Honourable Prime Minister had today with the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia during his call-on with the Governor-General, and during the call-on by the Leader of Opposition on Honourable Prime Minister of India, I could list roughly 10 or 11 key areas of partnership that the two Prime Ministers spent some time taking, not only just assessment of the progress in those areas over a period of last 1 year, ever since they met first in May last year, but also chalked out what they could focus on in months and years ahead, besides of course continuing building on the achievements so far. I would simply highlight the thematic topics under which these were discussed. We don't have time really enough to go into details of each one of them. So there were roughly 10 or 11 areas. First was trade, in which, as you heard both Prime Ministers speak in their press remarks, they focused on the achievement of ECTA between the two countries, but they also expressed a shared aspiration that the discussions on CECA, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, would progress rapidly. 2, investments. 3, technology. 4, tourism. 5, education. And as you all know, during the visit of Honourable Prime Minister of Australia to India very recently during Holi, 2 of the Australian universities opened up their first campus at the Gift City in Gujarat. 6, defence and security. 7, the entire domain of renewable energy, and in that the particular focus was on green hydrogen, both during the bilateral discussions as also during Prime Minister's individual meetings with the CEOs of the Australian companies yesterday. 8, the entire segment of migration and mobility. 9, the field of rare earths and critical minerals. Again, there also the entire ecosystem of how the two countries, how the private sector, business and industry of the two countries can partner was touched upon, whether it's technology or it is skill mapping or it is of course investments and naturally trade. 10, people to people cooperation. These were essentially 10 to and of course the 11th which was very prominently announced by the two Prime Ministers yesterday, as also during their press remarks earlier today, which is the opening of the Australian Consulate General in the city of Bengaluru in India, and the opening of the Indian Consulate General in the city of Brisbane in Australia. These were 11 odd bilateral specific topics on which the discussion time was spent by the two Prime Ministers. Besides the areas of bilateral importance, the two Prime Ministers also spent some time talking about regional and global issues. There I would highlight 6 broad categories where the discussions focused on. The first, Quad. Second, relating to the larger maritime and the terrestrial space of Indo-Pacific. 3, the impact of Russia-Ukraine ongoing conflict. 4, the PIC, India-Pacific, the engagement both of India and Australia with the countries of the Pacific. This was particularly contextualized in terms of Honorable Prime Minister of India's recent visit to Papua New Guinea. And the last one was on the potential cooperation between India and Australia in terms of benefiting the countries of the Global South. Sixth, I would say a specific focus, which was more on essentially global issue, on the reform of the UN Security Council, where you heard some of the remarks which were made during the press conference. Besides, you would have all noticed the exceptional warmth that was very visible pretty much across all the engagements, including the public engagements that the Honorable Prime Minister has had over the last couple of days. You were all witness to the energy intensive and absolutely vibrant community event yesterday where both the Prime Ministers were present. I would be doing an injustice if I tried to describe that in words. I think the words would be superfluous in this context, so I would bypass that. You also saw for yourself the unveiling of the foundation stone for Little India Gateway, as Honorable Prime Minister of India mentioned during his press remarks, that this would only strengthen the living bridge of the relationship between our two countries, which is the vibrant Indian community and the diaspora here. Honorable Prime Minister of Australia also mentioned about naming of the Sailani Avenue in Perth in the memory of the First World War veteran from India. Ceremonial welcome this morning at the Admiralty House, and of course the sheer chemistry and the friendship between the two Prime Ministers, which was there for all of us to see yesterday. Honorable Prime Minister of Australia compared it to the Bruce Springsteen. I think I'll just let it be there in that sense. Just briefly to also capture that in terms of the 10 areas of bilateral discussions that came up, we would suggest that we would think that 3 of them would really would be areas of intense focus in terms of our efforts in months and years ahead. One, of course, the green hydrogen, which is
so that is, of course, Foreign Secretary Vinay Kwatra, who is briefing the press on the big takeaways from Prime Minister Modi's visit to Australia.